the Talk Station is proud to present The War Files. The War Files, a selection of interviews honoring our warriors of the greatest generation, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
Your name?
David Farrior.
And where are you from?
I'm from Goldsboro.
Your background?
Well, background as far as my profession is concerned, I was an optometrist for 60 years in Beaufort.
All right. Let's talk about your World War II experience. How old were you when the war broke out, and where were you living at the time?
I was living on board a ship. I was in the Navy. I went in the Navy December 1940.
Why did you join the Navy?
Well, I'd been at state. I had 2 years of ROTC, and I didn't figure I wanted to go in the Army. So, and I'm sure glad I didn't. I mean, it wasn't any they were starting the draft, I think, in January of 41. Several of us went in the Navy at the same time. We went through boot camp together and never saw them anymore.
Now, recognizing that you were an ROTC, was the ROTC a requirement at state at the time?
Yes, it was a requirement of 2 years ROTC. If I stayed at state, I would have gotten, of course, an ROTC, Army ROTC commission, but I didn't desire that.
All right, so you enlisted in the Navy? I
enlisted in the Navy for 6 years. The draft situation didn't look real good. I mean, they could put you in any service at the time, and I wanted to go in the Navy, so that's where I went.
And what were you trained in?
I was a quartermaster. You know what a quartermaster is, of course, navigation, and that's where I started, and that's where I ended up.
David Farrior, of course, our guest here on this segment of War Files. How much time did you spend in training?
We went. It was service school. I believe it was 16 weeks. I don't really know.
Did you learn celestial nav?
Oh yeah, we learned a whole lot that I've forgotten.
And having to read Duttons, and then also keeping up with the sextants. Did they, at that point, tell you how important the task was, the job?
Oh, well, I'm sure they did. You know, a quartermaster's on the bridge all the time, so I knew what was going on. A lot of people didn't know what was going on, but we knew.
Well, you also knew the intended course and the ETA of where the ship was headed at all times.
Oh, yeah. They'd ask you down the passageway, said, "Well, where are we going?" I said, "I don't know." You say, "You liar."
All right. Where were you when the war broke out?
I was 2 days out of Norfolk. We had been down to South Africa. We had escorted 4 American luxury liners, which was converted from troop transports, and we went up to Nova Scotia to escort them. I was on a carrier at the time. I was on USS Ranger, and we picked up these 4 troop ships at Nova Scotia with, I don't really remember whether 4 or 5 destroyers, and we took off to escort them to South Africa.
This is before the war had broken out.
Oh yes, we were in the war before the war, and I'm sure our planes bombed a many poor whale out there thinking it was a submarine, but they actually did drop depth charges all the way to South Africa.
Who were on board the ships? Now you said troop transport. Were these U.S. soldiers?
No, they were Canadians. And we got down to Cape of Good Hope, and the Germans weren't supposed to be operating in submarines in the Indian Ocean. We let them go. And I had a friend who was on one of in the office. He said he was on one of the troop transports. Well, I remember the name of it. I don't now, but I remember the name of it. And he said when the war broke out, of course they had gotten to Singapore. For the reinforce the British there, and he says we had just gotten the troops unloaded when the Pearl Harbor or the Japanese started attacking Singapore, and so we got the H out of there.
So you were actually actively engaged on a U.S. carrier,
right,
without war being declared.
Right.
Obviously, as you mentioned, war had already been declared because we had been trying to protect naval ships from the wolf packs, as they were known,
yeah.
the submarines. But yet you were not at war, but you were actually actively engaged in.
We were engaged, and of course, Roosevelt was trying to keep us out of the war, but they said, well, he wanted these engagements so he'd get in the war, but I'm not sure whether that happened or not.
Was there a feeling among the other sailors that eventually we were going to be at war?
Yes, I think there was. I mean, I think we all knew that.
Was that the discussion on, say, the mess decks?
Yes, that's why we got in a little early, I think.
You were at sea when Pearl Harbor was bombed.
Yeah.
What was the reaction on board the ship?
I knew where Pearl Harbor was because of the charts we had corrected and so forth. We had been running at night with the lights off the ship anyway, working on the red lights, real pleasure. But we'd use wartime cruising situations at the time, so we got into Norfolk 2 days. I reckon that was the 9th of December '41. They had already prepared for something to happen as far as the planes. We had a net around the ship to protect it from submarines. They should have been had that at Pearl Harbor. They didn't have those precautions, but what we did, of course, the war's already started then. The numbers of people who were killed on the East Coast, up and down the coast by the German submarines, was something like 5,000. 500 ships were sunk. And we were sitting in Norfolk doing nothing at times when that was going on. And, of course, we had the destroyers over there in the Navy Yard that were World War II destroyers. They were just sitting there until finally they got them out and cleaned up the German submarines.
You've been in the Navy for a year, and when war breaks out, and so you're looking at, recognizing you're going to be engaged in warfare. What's going through your mind at this point?
Well, we were just doing a job. I don't know there's anything in particularly in mind. You just had a job on.
What happened after you got back to Norfolk? Obviously, you said you were engaged in anti-submarine warfare.
Yeah.
The Ranger, it was a Navy carrier.
Navy carrier. The first original carrier built from the keel up was the Ranger.
Was that considered good duty?
Well, yes, I think everybody liked carrier duty. I mean, I don't know that everybody liked duty, but carrier duty was good duty.
What transpired after the bombing of Pearl?
Like I said, we did some submarine patrol and didn't do a whole lot really. We did patrol in the North Atlantic, but the real first thing we got into was the invasion of North Africa. That was in November of 1941. We escorted landings there. Have a sea story to tell if you'll listen to me.
I want to hear the sea story.
My station was on a wheel. I credit my captain having some divine guidance, irregardless of what people think about God. We were cruising along, and they had a plane had a minor crash, and F4F's wheels would fold up on it every now and then. It hit the deck too hard. They called from the flight deck and said that they could not land aircraft for the time being until they cleared the wreck. So the captain said, "Quartermaster, let's come 30 degrees to the right." Well, I turned the wheel 15 degrees down the road. We had not got to the course when which didn't turn a carrier around on a dime. It took about 50 cents worth. But
a couple of miles.
Anyway, we had not got to the course, and they called from flight deck and said, "We can start landing the aircraft again. We've got the plane clear." So he said, "All right, come on back into the wind." Well, that was one of the jobs that quartermaster was trained for, was keeping the wind 10 degrees off the port bow, left bow, if you want to put it. And we started turning, and the lookouts reported 4 torpedoes on the port side. And the normal evasion of torpedoes is to turn towards them, which we were already doing. And they split us on both sides. I mean, they came down both sides of the ship. We didn't hit us. And the German submarine was sitting there waiting for us, and his whole conning tower came out of the water. And he crash dived before he got destroyers on top of him, and he got away. And I have a newspaper clipping from Philadelphia Inquirer and said he had been decorated by Hitler for sinking the Ranger. Well, he never even got close. Well, that was the biggest experience I had in the Atlantic, I'll tell you.
From your perspective, there's a sense of relief, or you just...
Oh, I'm sure it was. That was only torpedoes I think I saw during the war, and only German submarine I saw. So I was transferred, that was February 43, new construction, put another carrier in commission. And I credit the people in Washington in those days from using fillers on the cigarettes, because they had a little bit more sense than I think they have today. But anyway, we had 9 light carriers being built in Camden, New Jersey. And so the people in Washington decided to make carriers out of them. Well, we were a little bit top heavy, but not that much top heavy. And we could carry about half as many planes as a larger carriers could carry. But we, of course, we'd had a bunch of losses in the Pacific. And put the thing in commission in May of, I guess it was 43. And then we took a shakedown cruise and went on to the Pacific.
What was the name of the carrier?
USS Cowpens, named after the Battle of Cowpens in South Carolina during the Revolutionary War. Mm-hmm. The carriers were named after historical things.
Well, like the Yorktown, the Enterprise.
Yeah. Well, I served on the Cowpens for about 14 months, and I was supposed to be coming back to the States. Put me off in Pearl Harbor, waiting transportation. So one morning, they came through and called my name. They said, well, you go down to building so-and-so, you on Admiral Gardner's staff. I said, what? So I went down there, and that's what I did. Admiral Gardner was probably an old man of about 46 or 7 years old.
Wow.
But he had been captain of the Enterprise, and we went back on the Ranger for a few weeks and training night fighters. The carrier we were going to end up on was the Enterprise, which is where we went. We went on to Saratoga for 3 or 4 weeks training night fighters. And the Enterprise was the first carrier designated as a night carrier. And we pulled out of the formation at night. The formation were 4 carriers and 2 battleships or cruisers and about 18 destroyers. We had 4 of those groups out there at the time. But the carriers were slow getting in. We operated with a fast carrier task force. We'd pull out of the formation at night and launch our planes at dusk as they were taking their planes, the other carriers taking the planes in. And we had F-6Fs and torpedo plane, the Avenger. They would go out and they had a radar. It was not perfected, sure, certainly not perfected to this day, but anyway, they were able to orient the planes into an area where the Japanese were trying to bomb us at night. They'd get out there, and the radar from the ship would get vector them in to close enough so they could pick them up on the radar on the planes. And they shot down a mini one, and people wonder why I don't like fireworks. I said I saw enough fireworks in the Pacific. When they would hit a Japanese plane, the Japanese did not have self-sealing gas tanks. They had very little armor protecting the pilot. But anyway, they'd hit those things at night, and you talk about a fireworks. Avengers, the torpedo planes, could stay in the air about 8 hours, and they'd go in and sweep out the harbors or see what was in the harbors and send they planes would go in and bomb the harbors. The Enterprise was a fantastic ship, and they had Enterprise got more battle stars than any ship in the Navy. It was the only carrier in the Pacific one time. At the time we landed in Guadalcanal, all the rest of the carriers had been sunk. And it was the only one supporting the landings in Guadalcanal at the time. I don't know whether at the beginning of the Guadalcanal.
What was it like aboard ship when you weren't standing watch?
There were times you had classes. You had of course, we were on 4 hours at a stretch, 2 watches, I guess, 4-hour watches, and of course you had what 16 hours, 6 and 8 or 40, yeah, 16 hours, and of course you had to sleep a little bit, and the night carrier, the Enterprise, I stayed on the bridge. I had as long as we had plane in the air, I was on the bridge, on a flag bridge.
What was the food like?
Food was good. We had no complaints of food. I was chief before I went to the Enterprise, and the chief's quarters had the best food on board the ship.
Well, the chief's quarters also has the best coffee aboard ship.
Oh yeah.
The fact that you were in pretty much in theater the whole time. How many years did you spend in theater?
I spent 5 years on board ship and 5 years at sea. There were times we'd be out for several months in the Pearl Harbor. Of course, that's why I love Hawaii today, because it was home.
Right.
And we'd get into Pearl Harbor every few months, but we'd be out as much as 6 months at a time. And of course, you had advanced bases. We had a bunch of islands out there: Ulithi, Majuro, Kwajalein, and they all were big bases. I mean, you get up in the morning, all you could see was ships. I mean, inside of a coral reef. We'd be there for 3 or 4 weeks, and we'd have a couple of recreation trips on the islands. Go out, get in the ocean, and play a little baseball, and then we had a sum total of 2 beers. That's all they let us have in those days. We were supporting landings in Saipan and Guam and Tinian. We were probably 40, 50 miles off the coast. The Japanese were approaching. They knew we were there, and we knew they were there, and they came in they were going to land in Guam, and a lot of them, we'd done a pretty good job on the Japanese by that time, but we still had work to do. But they had a lot of young, inexperienced pilots who would be trying to land on Guam, and we got in. Our planes got into them and shot down. I believe it was about 400 planes were shot down in that turkey shoot.
Wow.
And the carriers, carriers never saw each other. We never saw another carrier, Japanese carrier, but that was fine. We didn't need to be that close to them. But of course, they were coming in more for landing and to refuel in Guam and get back out after us in the area where we were. I say maybe 40, 50 miles off the coast. The Enterprise got hit several times while I was aboard it.
When you mean say hit, how did it get hit?
With bombs, dive bombers. You can't believe how fantastic that looked. Of course, you knew they were going to drop a bomb. And we had a plane to come in so low over the flight deck when he dropped his bomb. It hit flat, didn't explode. Hit against the island, and the tail fuse broke off of it, and that exploded, but the bomb didn't explode, and it rode over the side of the flight deck, and the scupper or gutter, scupper is what they call them, probably about 8 inches wide, maybe 4 inches high, on the edge of the flight deck to take care of the water. And the bomb stopped in that scupper, and two men on the catwalk on 20 millimeter guns, got up on the flight deck and threw that bomb overboard. And how they got over that catwalk, I don't know, but and it was supposed to be a 640-pound bomb, but they tossed it like it was a toothpick. And
you spent 6 years at sea.
right.
I mean, what was it like when you got home? I mean, where were you when the war ended?
I was in San Francisco when the war ended. I got shore duty at the Branch Hydrographic Office in San Francisco, and I was there about 6 months.
Had you been there 6 months prior to the end of the war?
No, I got back in the States in May of 45, I guess it was, yeah, May of 45, and got shore duty. And anyway, I was there Christmas that year, and shortly after Christmas, a man came in the hydrographic office and he says, "I've got a seagoing tug." He said, he's a Lieutenant J.G. He says, "I got a seagoing tug out in the bay, San Francisco Bay." And I said, he said, "They won't let me go until I get somebody that can navigate the ship." I said, "Do you know anybody that wants to go to the East Coast?" I said, "You're looking at him." So I was able to get transferred. They were sending the boys, this is after the war now, they were sending the boys that were getting, the offices were closing and so forth, they were sending them out to Bikini Atoll for the atom bomb test. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have any desire to go back to Pacific. So I got on that seagoing tug, and we brought it to New London, Connecticut. And I was on there probably 3 or 4 months, I don't remember. And anyway,
there's quite a difference between a big carrier and a big carrier.
Right.
I mean, the carrier can go, which was at the time one of the fastest ships in the.
Yeah, well, the carriers, a lot of the destroyers could keep up with us, but and of course we had battleships, right. The World War II version of battleships, mm-hmm. not the World War I version of battleships. They could cruise at our speed.
Back to the story about the Enterprise and the USS North Carolina.
Yes. We were in the zone there with Japanese planes coming in, and North Carolina was firing at the planes, and they 40 millimeters were pretty potent weapons as far as hitting the ship, hitting an airplane too. But anyway, they cleaned off the fantail one afternoon because they kept firing at that plane. And I'm sure if I'd been on a gun, I'd had a Japanese plane in my sights, I'd have kept firing until it went down or it hit us.
So the plane was basically flying between the USS North Carolina and the Enterprise, and it was down low.
Yes. And
the firing from the North Carolina, the shells hit the Enterprise in the process.
That's correct.
And you said it cleared off it hit an airplane?
Well, it hit the second afternoon. It hit the planes on deck and caught them on fire. And we had one tremendous fire. I mean, I don't know how the boys ever got that thing under control. The 40 millimeter shells were popping all over the place, and all the ammunition was exploding. And it was one fantastic sight, I guess I should say, of firepower.
And you had another situation where it also hit men in the turrets?
Yeah, they hit on the fantail. That was the first afternoon. It was on the fantail. There were 4 quad mounts, I believe. I don't know whether it's 4 or 2 on the fantail. But of course, they had a bunch of men operating those 40 millimeter guns, the way they had to feed them and so forth. But they did kill 25, I think, on the fantail that afternoon. And
this is friendly fire, mind you.
Friendly fire, right. I said, they talk about friendly fire. I said, I know all about that. But we had to get out of the combat area. We were burning pretty good when we left, and they were hoping to get the fires under control by dark so we wouldn't make a good target for the Japanese night fighters and what have you.
So where did you repair the ship?
I think it was Ulithi Atoll, which was an advanced base, and it was a huge coral reef. And when you got up in the mornings to go up on that bridge, you couldn't see anything but ships. I mean, we had hundreds of ships there. I mean, from destroyers on up to utility ships and cargo ships and what have you. How they ever fed all these boys, I'll never know. We thought they'd just put us in there and we'd go on home, but we didn't make it.
What did they do?
We went back to Iwo Jima and.
What was it like trying to repair a large carrier out in the middle of the Pacific?
Well, like I said, they had ships there with the CBs on board them and the construction ships and what have you. They came aboard with all the equipment and got us back and got us out of there in 5 or 6 days, I think it was.
You said something a moment ago about earlier about the decks of the carriers. What were the decks of the carriers made of?
Made out of wood. I'm not sure. I used to think it was teak wood, but it wasn't teak wood. It's some kind of spruce hardwood.
So the deck of the carrier that the planes were landing on was wood?
Was wood, right. And the British in those days had steel decks. We didn't have any steel deck carriers. Of course, it would have made a carrier a whole lot more top-heavy to have a steel deck, I guess. But the block of wood that like I said, I have a block of wood that came from the Enterprise. Somebody had scrounged a few boards.
You've been listening to The War Files, a selection of interviews honoring our warriors of the greatest generation, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. The War Files is a Talkstation presentation.